But combine that with these other developments that are taking place. But the Fed is rolling out a system called Fed Now. It's going into kind of testing in a few months. Actually, I think this summer. They've announced this, and this is the interbank version. So it's not going to be on my smartphone, or it's not going to be at retail yet. But they want to make sure it all works between the banks, the interbank payment system, and then they'll kind of roll it up. But they also got to get rid of cash, because you say, all right, I don't like this system. I don't want them knowing what books I'm buying, whatever. I'm going to use cash. Well, you got to get rid of cash. You're seeing that already. How many places you've seen no cash accepted? So they'll do that. And then the other thing they got to whack is Bitcoin. Now, I'm not a Bitcoin fan, but it is what it is. If people want it, knock yourself out. But that's not good enough for the government. So going back to our banking crisis discussion, on the same night, Sunday, March 12th, when they said all the deposits are protected, they also whacked Signature Bank. They took out a bank called Signature Bank. And Barney Frank was on the board of directors, as in Dodd-Frank, so that didn't do him a lot of good. But Frank said, and he was correct, he said, if you had just let us go until Monday, when the Fed announced Sunday night that they would buy all the underwater bonds at par, we would have been fine. Why did you take us out? Why were we any different than any other medium-sized bank, which were all in the same condition? The answer is they had a portal, going back to my casino metaphor, to the crypto world called Signet. And they were very active in converting cryptocurrencies into mainstream banking. They were a regular bank, member bank, FDIC insured, but they had this portal between the banking world and the crypto world, and that's what they wanted to kill. And that's why they took out Signature Bank and didn't give them one day's grace to survive. So they got to whack Bitcoin, they got to whack cash. And I always say, if you want to slaughter cattle, you got to herd them into the slaughterhouse, get them in a pen and get them in a chute. Well, you got to get rid of cash and crypto, herd everybody into the digital world, and then you can whack them politically, and that's what's going on.
Okay, Jim, we've got to wrap up, but before we do our final question and our locals question, there is an obvious question here, which is, if you're an ordinary person listening to this, and you haven't jumped out of a window yet, what do you do about it?
Well, a couple of things, and this gets back, I guess I digressed a little bit when I said have gold in your portfolio, and going back further to the reserve currency thing. There is no alternative to the dollar as a reserve currency in terms of bond markets. There's no bond market with all, derivatives and futures and options and settlement and clearance and rule of law and all that stuff, but there is an alternative called gold. So gold will be where countries go, and it should be where investors go, follow the money, as they say. And central banks have been net buyers for the last 13 years. So they're about the best informed players you can imagine. So I'd have some gold for that reason, not because it's shiny and pretty, but because central banks are huge net buyers, and it is the alternative to the dollar. There's no other currency that comes close, but gold does. So that's a reason to have some gold in your portfolio. And also this loss of confidence in the dollar that we've been talking about, independent of what other countries are doing, it'll preserve wealth. It'll be fine the next day. If there's some kind of panic or collapse or revulsion against the dollar, that's how currencies die, your gold will hold up just fine.
And before we go, do you think they use the pandemic to get rid of cash?
They use the pandemic for a lot of things, and we'll need another hour on that. Maybe you can invite me back.
We'll do that.
In due course. But the pandemic was a dry run for the climate change panic that they're trying to promote. So my biggest shock at the pandemic, when they said masks don't work, the research is clear. By the way, these are not opinions. I'm happy to give anybody 50 peer-reviewed academic papers that back this up. Masks don't work. Lockdowns don't work. The guy who won the Presidential Medal of Freedom for eradicating smallpox wrote a paper in 2006. D.A. Henderson, greatest virologist in history, said lockdowns don't work. But of course that was ignored by Anthony Fauci because he had to cover up his own crimes in Wuhan. So
there's a lot of truth bombs being dropped in this episode. We know all this.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just messing.
But my point is, it was a really good try. You know what shocked me the most? Not that the government would lie, not that they would use fear, but that people would go along with it.
Yeah,
that's what shocked me.
I was the same.
That's what shocked me. So you're wearing a mask. A cop had to basically accost me to get me to put a mask on, and then as soon as he was gone, I'd pull it down under my chin. I never wore a mask. Best treatment for COVID was get outside, get some sunshine, fresh air, maybe a little vitamin C, exercise, lose a few pounds. That was the right therapy, and we did the opposite. Put a mask on, stay inside. So as a dry run, it worked. Fear works, and people are more obedient than I would have expected. And so if those two things are true, then you run the climate change playbook, and you get world control. We can actually look. Everyone's like AI is the end, and ChatGPT is the end of the search engine, which it is. That's why Google is in such a panic, and they're rolling out their AI. But we can look beyond AI to the end of AI. AI is the end of the search engine. We can look beyond that to AI. And the reason I promise to be brief, we're coming out the end of a 2,300-year-old tunnel. Plato was a transitional figure between the Homeric society. Homer never wrote a word. It was all, he composed it orally, it was recited orally. That's how people learned it. It wasn't a poem in their minds, it was the encyclopedia of Greek behavior. Plato started writing things down using the phonetic alphabet, which was brand new at the time. And we've been using phonetic alphabet ever since. We're now coming out the other end of that into an oral, acoustic, tactile society. And everyone likes emojis, they think they're cute. Emojis are hieroglyphics. They're not phonic. And the same thing with, universal signs, hip hop. I'm not dinging hip hop. I'm just saying it's all acoustic. And kids are getting an education. They're absorbing it electronically. They're not sitting in classes. They should be, but they're not. So what does it mean for the whole computer world? Where we just taught ChatGPT trains a computer to read 1 billion pages of text. What does it mean when we don't read anymore?
What does it mean? It means we're not ingesting information properly.
Well, we're ingesting it in an electronic way. Marshall McLuhan said when the first Sputnik went up, the entire world became a human artifact because we wrapped it in aluminum foil. So some of this is just kind of updating McLuhan for the ChatGPT world. But he came up with the phrase global village. Everyone says, it sounds kind of nice, global village. He says, no, villages are brutal, violent, and tribal. So it was an accurate description, good choice of words. He said, don't think that means warm and fuzzy. We are becoming more tribal. And that's what acoustic environment, electronic environment is doing to us. And we don't know it. It's, I always say the fish, we don't know who discovered water, but we're sure it was not the fish because the fish is in the water. You have to take the fish out of the water. It's like, where's the water? Well, we're in this electronic environment. We don't even know it.
Yeah. We can do another hour on that as well, and I have no doubt that we will. Jim, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show, and that's why you should head over to Locals, join us there for the bonus questions that you've already submitted that only you will get to see the answers to.
Take care and see you soon.